The name Anastasia Rain echoed in my mind like a thunderclap. Who was she? And why was she being appointed as the senior strategy director? The very position Lyra, with my 20 years of unwavering commitment to EtherCorp, had been poised to claim? A wave of disbelief, mingled with a burning sense of indignation, surged through me. I couldn't believe it. For 2 decades, I had watched EtherCorp blossom from a fledgling startup into a tech behemoth. Every brick, every project bore my imprint. Now, at 48 years old, I was facing a harsh truth, being sidelined by a complete stranger. The executive boardroom on the top floor of EtherCorp, where crystal chandeliers cast their glow upon the oval table of polished black marble, was usually a place for decisions that shaped the future. Today, the atmosphere felt even more strained than usual. It was the most anticipated meeting of the year, where the senior leadership was set to announce new promotions, and I, Lyra, with my 20 years chas of dedication to the corporation, was certainly expecting to be among them. I sat among my colleagues, familiar faces with whom I had built EtherCorp from its very inception, feeling a mix of anticipation and pride. Victor Thorne, our CEO, stood at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over each person before settling on me. My heart pounded. This was it, the moment I had waited for. I had poured my youth and expertise into this company, from crafting core strategies to navigating economic storms. The position of senior strategy director, or even a seat on the board, felt within my grasp. Good morning, everyone. Victor's voice resonated, sharp and unyielding. We are here today to mark a significant milestone for Ether Corporation. We are expanding, and that requires fresh faces, fresh ideas. A soft murmur rippled through the room. I looked directly at Victor, ready to receive the news. I had a brief speech prepared in my head about gratitude and my commitment to continued dedication. We have decided to appoint Anastasia Rain to the position of Senior Strategy Director, Victor declared, without a hint of hesitation. She will be overseeing our upcoming urban ecosystem integration project. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. I couldn't mask my surprise. That was the position I had been promised. Victor continued, his gaze drifting past me dismissively. We want Lyra to spend the next 3 months training Anastasia. She'll need to master every aspect of our workflow and our partnerships. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Training? Training the person who would replace me? The humiliation burned, hot and fierce within me. I clenched my fists under the table. Victor, with all due respect, I began, trying to keep my voice as professional as possible. I'm always happy to assist any new team member, but I need to ask, what specific qualifications and experience does Anastasia Rain possess to assume such a senior strategic role? This is a massive undertaking, requiring deep understanding of the market and our internal processes. A flicker of annoyance crossed Victor's eyes. He placed his hand on the table, a small but authoritative gesture. Lyra, I think you're misunderstanding. This isn't a discussion. This is a directive. Anastasia will take that position, and your job is to ensure she's ready. The bitter truth crashed down. This promotion meeting wasn't for me. It was a meeting to announce my obsolescence. 2 decades of dedication, 2 decades of building, only to be supplanted by someone unknown, someone who seemingly had a special connection to the CEO. I rose, feeling as though I was walking on thin ice. I understand, Victor, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I will consider this directive. I turned and walked out of the boardroom, the door clicking shut behind me like a final judgment. It wasn't just the sound of a closing door. It was the sound of an era for Lyra at EtherCorp slamming shut. Chaos churned within me, a suppressed fury. But deep inside, a tiny spark of resolve ignited. They had underestimated me, and they were going to pay. The cold steel of the elevator door reflected my distorted image as it closed, severing me from the polished facade of EtherCorp's executive floor. My mind was a whirlwind of rage and disbelief. 20 years, 2 decades of my life poured into that company, only to be dismissed with such callous indifference. Victor Thorne's condescending gaze, Anastasia Rain's phantom presence, it all coalesced into a burning knot in my stomach. I was Lyra, not some disposable pawn in his corporate game. They had made a grave mistake. My apartment, a minimalist sanctuary in the bustling heart of Neo-Viridian City, felt different that evening. The sleek, chrome lines and panoramic views of the illuminated cityscape usually brought me peace, but tonight, they felt sterile, echoing my hollow victory. I walked over to my digital assistant, its gentle blue light a stark contrast to the storm inside me. "Access Project Chimera," I commanded, my voice betraying a slight tremor. Project Chimera. For the past 16 months, every evening and weekend, this had been my secret life. A clandestine collaboration with Arthur Sterling, a brilliant but eccentric AI architect I'd met at a tech summit 3 years ago. We called our venture Cognosphere, an AI-powered strategic decision engine designed to revolutionize corporate planning. It was audacious, groundbreaking, and entirely off EtherCorp's radar. My contributions had been immense, refining the algorithms with real-world strategic insights, building intuitive user interfaces, and shaping its market appeal. I'd done it all anonymously, using a secure, untraceable network, a ghost in the machine. Arthur's virtual presence flickered onto the screen, his usually jovial face replaced by a look of concern. "Lyra? You sound agitated. Everything all right with Ether?" I let out a bitter laugh. "More than all right, Arthur. I've just been officially promoted out of my job. Effective immediately, I'm to train some unqualified protege named Anastasia to take over my strategic director role for the new urban ecosystem integration project." Arthur's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? After all you've done for them? That's their loss. Our gain, I suppose." He paused, then his eyes gleamed with a familiar entrepreneurial fire. "This just means you can finally dedicate yourself to Cognosphere, right? We're on the cusp of something monumental. Remember, we just secured that pilot deal with Omni Logistics last week. Their old partners, no less." He was right. Omni Logistics, a massive global logistics firm, had been a longtime associate of EtherCorp. Their decision to pilot Cognosphere was a significant validation, a testament to the platform's potential. We were currently negotiating a 2-year contract worth an initial $50 million, with potential for another $75 million in expansion. This was not some side hustle anymore. This was a legitimate force. A cold, precise resolve began to replace the hot anger. EtherCorp thought they could discard me? They thought they could replace 20 years of institutional knowledge and strategic foresight with an inexperienced figurehead? They had underestimated me. They had underestimated Cognosphere. The true game had just begun. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Arthur, I need full access to the development roadmap and every single client interaction detail. It's time we accelerate things. A lot." "Consider it done," he replied, a knowing smile spreading across his face. "Welcome to the full-time gig, Lyra. It's going to be quite a ride." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the glittering cityscape. EtherCorp, that monolithic structure looming in the distance, seemed smaller now, less intimidating. They had just lit a fuse, and they had no idea the explosion was coming from within. The following weeks at EtherCorp were a peculiar blend of agony and quiet satisfaction. Every morning, I'd walk into the sleek, modern office tower in Neo-Viridian City, a place that felt both familiar and utterly alien. My desk, once a command center buzzing with activity, now served as a temporary training ground for Anastasia Rain. She was exactly as I'd suspected, confident, charming, and utterly devoid of any substantial strategic acumen. At 26 years old, she carried herself with an air of entitlement that grated on my nerves. Her understanding of complex data analytics and urban infrastructure integration was superficial at best. When I tried to delve into the intricacies of EtherCorp's proprietary algorithms or the nuances of our decade-long partnerships with city municipalities, her eyes would glaze over. "Oh, Lyra, that's incredibly detailed," she'd chirp, flashing a practiced smile. "I'm sure the team can handle the nitty-gritty. My role is more about the big picture, the vision, you know?" I'd nod, a tight smile on my face, making mental notes. "Big picture," she said. The big picture at EtherCorp was built on millions of tiny, interconnected details she clearly had no interest in grasping. This confirmed my suspicions. Her appointment was not based on merit. It was a favor, a political maneuver by Victor Thorne, perhaps to appease a board member, or more likely, for personal reasons. My role, officially, was to facilitate her transition. Unofficially, it became a masterclass in controlled sabotage. I didn't overtly withhold information, but I presented it in a way that highlighted her deficiencies. I'd overload her with technical documents, schedule meetings with highly specialized engineers, and ask her to synthesize complex reports. Her attempts were always clumsy, often incorrect, and I'd dutifully correct them, always copying Victor Thorne on the revised versions. I wanted him to see, subtly, that his new protégé was floundering. My aim wasn't to get Anastasia fired yet. It was to subtly undermine her credibility and highlight the chasm between her capabilities and the demands of the role. Meanwhile, my real work began each evening. Back in the digital sanctuary of my apartment, I'd immerse myself in Cognosphere. Arthur Sterling and I had been pushing the limits of the platform. We'd just closed a deal with Metropark Transit, a major public transport provider in a neighboring city, for an initial $3 million pilot with projections to expand to $10 million within a single year. Their system, which handled over 2 million daily commuters, was the perfect test case for Cognosphere's traffic optimization modules. "This is incredible, Lyra," Arthur exclaimed during one of our late-night video calls, his face illuminated by the glow of data visualizations. "The data models are performing beyond expectation. We're reducing commute times by nearly 18% in peak hours. That's billions of dollars in productivity gains annually for a city like Neo-Viridian." My heart swelled with a quiet pride. This was my legacy, not the crumbling one at EtherCorp. I was the silent architect, building something revolutionary in the shadows. We were currently negotiating with 3 other major urban development firms, all looking to leverage AI for their smart city initiatives. Each success cemented Cognosphere's position as a leader, and each new contract drew a potential client away from EtherCorp, which was still stuck in its traditional, cumbersome strategic frameworks. The irony was delicious. While I was formally training Anastasia on outdated methodologies, I was simultaneously and discreetly helping Cognosphere outmaneuver EtherCorp in the burgeoning market for advanced strategic solutions. I was feeding them just enough rope to hang themselves. Every incorrect assumption Anastasia made, every crucial detail she overlooked, was a small victory for me, and a step closer to EtherCorp's inevitable stumble. I knew this covert operation was risky. If Victor Thorne ever discovered my involvement with Cognosphere, especially after my dismissal, the consequences could be severe. But the exhilaration of building something truly impactful, something that dwarfed EtherCorp's current endeavors, far outweighed the fear. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about validating my vision, proving that true value came from expertise, not from cronyism. The chessboard was set, and I was making my moves, one calculated step at a time, towards a checkmate they wouldn't see coming. The months bled into a strange rhythm. By day, I was the dutiful mentor at EtherCorp, patiently explaining concepts to Anastasia that she consistently failed to grasp. She had a knack for regurgitating buzzwords, but lacked any real depth of understanding. I'd watch her stumble through presentations, relying heavily on my meticulously prepared slides and often misinterpreting key data points. Each time, a small, vindictive part of me reveled in her inadequacy, knowing that Victor Thorne's ill-conceived gamble was beginning to show cracks. I even subtly forgot to include certain critical, albeit complex strategic models in her training materials, ensuring she'd miss opportunities to truly impress. Lyra, do you really think we need to deep dive into the quantum resonance algorithms for the city planning module? She'd ask, her nose wrinkling slightly at the technical jargon. Can't we just get a simplified summary? Our clients prefer clarity, not complexity. Anastasia, I'd patiently explain. The clarity comes from understanding the complexity. Without knowing how those algorithms predict urban flow, you can't truly optimize the transit system or forecast energy demands. It's the backbone of the entire urban ecosystem integration project. She'd just nod vaguely, scribble something unintelligible in her notepad, and move on. It was frustrating, yet gratifying. Her superficial approach was precisely what EtherCorp, under Victor's increasingly misguided leadership, was becoming. By night, however, I was transformed. I was the core strategic mind behind Cognisphere, the silent force driving its meteoric rise. Arthur Sterling and I were no longer just building, we were conquering. Our initial $50 million contract with Omni Logistics had already expanded to $80 million within 7 months, exceeding all projections. The successful implementation of Cognisphere's supply chain optimization module had saved them nearly 15% in operational costs, a figure that resonated loudly across the industry. Lyra, we're getting inbound inquiries from 3 new major players in the logistics sector just this week, Arthur reported, his excitement palpable during our secure daily calls. They've heard about Omni Logistics' incredible returns. One of them is even a former EtherCorp client, Global Freight Networks. Remember them? They left Ether about 2 years ago, citing stagnant innovation. A cold smile touched my lips. Global Freight Networks. I remembered them well. Their departure had been a significant blow to EtherCorp's reputation back then. The irony was sweet. Our client base was diversifying rapidly. We'd just secured a substantial $7 million deal with the Central District Utility Board for Intelligent Grid Management, and another $12 million agreement with a consortium of housing developers aiming for smarter urban living spaces. Each project wasn't just about revenue. It was about demonstrating Cognisphere's versatility and unparalleled analytical power. Our AI could process billions of data points in seconds, identifying patterns and proposing solutions that EtherCorp's human teams, burdened by legacy systems and internal politics, simply couldn't match. My network, painstakingly built over 2 decades in the industry, was now subtly redirecting opportunities towards Cognisphere. Old contacts, aware of my quiet departure from EtherCorp, and increasingly disillusioned with its direction under Anastasia's nominal leadership, were seeking cutting-edge solutions. They trusted my judgment, my expertise, and while they didn't know I was the mastermind behind Cognisphere, they knew it had my implicit endorsement. Rumors, too, began to circulate within the industry about EtherCorp's struggles. Whispers of declining client satisfaction, missed deadlines, and a worrying exodus of experienced personnel reached my ears. Anastasia's big-picture approach was failing spectacularly. Key strategic initiatives were stalling, and several large, lucrative contracts that EtherCorp had been pursuing for months, including a massive $100 million deal for a new citywide public safety network, were suddenly on shaky ground. I felt no remorse. I had offered my best to EtherCorp for 2 decades. I had warned Victor Thorne. He had chosen to discard me for a political pawn. Now, the ripples of his decision were turning into tidal waves, and I, the quiet architect in the shadows, was poised to direct them. The fall of EtherCorp was not just inevitable. It was, in a way, my design. The decline of EtherCorp was becoming increasingly undeniable, even to those blinded by corporate inertia. Reports of client dissatisfaction weren't just whispers anymore. They were growing louder, echoing through industry forums and financial news outlets. The Urban Ecosystem Integration Project, once touted as EtherCorp's flagship initiative, was stumbling badly. Anastasia Rain, despite her polished facade, simply couldn't grasp the intricate technical requirements or manage the diverse stakeholders effectively. My training had, ironically, prepared her to fail spectacularly without appearing overtly incompetent. Lyra, the smart grid optimization module for Neo Viridian's energy sector, is showing alarming discrepancies. One of the junior analysts, a bright young man named Ben, confessed to me nervously one afternoon. He was still under the impression I was a senior mentor, not a soon-to-be departed relic. Anastasia signed off on a revised power distribution plan, but our simulations predict a 15% energy loss in Sector Gamma during peak hours, possibly leading to widespread outages. I feigned concern, clucking my tongue. Is that so, Ben? Did you try to bring this to Anastasia's attention? I did, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. She said it was minor calibration and to focus on the big picture deliverables. But Lyra, this could be catastrophic for thousands of residents. Indeed, I said, a chilling sense of satisfaction washing over me. Make sure you document everything, Ben. Every single discrepancy. It's crucial for accountability. I knew he would. He was a good kid, earnest and diligent, unlike some others. I gave him a subtle nod, a silent affirmation that I believed him, encouraging him to keep observing. Meanwhile, Cognisphere was soaring. Our $80 million Omni-Logistics contract was now projected to exceed $100 million within the next 4 months due to their expanded global operations, all optimized by our AI. The former EtherCorp client, Global Freight Networks, signed an $18 million deal with us, publicly praising Cognisphere's unparalleled predictive analytics and innovation. This was a direct public indictment of EtherCorp's stagnation. Arthur Sterling and I were working tirelessly, often pulling all-nighters. We had just secured another significant partnership, a $25 million agreement with the regional government of Sector Delta to implement Cognisphere's urban planning and resource allocation modules. This was a direct competitor to a similar bid EtherCorp had been vying for, and we had won by a landslide, thanks to our superior technology and rapid deployment capabilities. Lyra, we're growing so fast, we might need to consider a second round of funding within the next 6 months, Arthur announced excitedly during one of our calls. Our current valuation is already hovering around $1.2 billion. Hold off on that for now, Arthur, I advised, a mischievous glint in my eye. We might have a very large, very desperate client coming our way soon. One that could make us even bigger without needing external investors just yet. Arthur paused, a knowing smile spreading across his face. Are we talking about them? Patience, I simply said. The web is tightening. They'll come to us when they realize no one else can untangle their mess. The board members of EtherCorp, once so eager to endorse Victor Thorne's questionable appointments, were growing agitated. Their quarterly earnings reports were dismal. Investor confidence was plummeting. The $100 million public safety network deal they were chasing had fallen through, snatched away by a smaller, more agile competitor using advanced AI. A competitor I knew, through my network, was secretly leveraging our foundational strategic principles, indirectly influenced by Cognisphere's public successes. I heard through the grapevine that internal meetings at EtherCorp were becoming increasingly tense. Victor Thorne was facing unprecedented pressure. His visionary hires and fresh ideas had led the company to the brink. It was only a matter of time before they realized the solution they desperately needed wasn't some new, inexperienced face, but the very expertise they had so carelessly discarded. My final day at EtherCorp approached. The irony was palpable. They thought they were letting me go, severing a tie. But what they were actually doing was untethering a powerful current, one that was now flowing directly towards their unsuspecting ship, ready to capsize it. My quiet strategic war was nearing its most decisive battle. My final day at EtherCorp arrived with a peculiar mix of relief and grim satisfaction. I walked out of the gleaming tower for the last time, not with a box of personal belongings, but with a quiet sense of triumph. The mutual separation papers had been signed weeks ago, a formality that masked the deeper strategic game at play. Victor Thorne believed he was severing a problematic limb. In reality, he was cutting the very artery that fed his company's strategic heart. The first few weeks post-Ether were exhilarating. I poured all my energy into Cognisphere. We launched a beta version of our urban resilience module, a predictive analytics tool that could forecast and mitigate citywide crises, from power outages to traffic gridlock. It was an instant hit, garnering praise from government agencies and urban planners alike. Our revenue projections for the next fiscal year soared past $200 million, a number that made EtherCorp's recent quarterly losses look positively quaint. Then the call came. It was from Eleanor Vance, a board member at EtherCorp, a pragmatic woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper business mind. She had always respected my work, even if she rarely challenged Victor Thorne directly. "Lyra." Her voice was taut, laced with an urgency I hadn't heard before. "We have a crisis. The urban ecosystem integration project is a disaster. Anastasia, well, let's just say her big picture is causing very real, very expensive problems. We're facing potential lawsuits over infrastructure failures in Sector Gamma, and our stock has plummeted 20% in the last month. The board is demanding answers." I feigned surprise, though a slow, knowing smile touched my lips. "Oh dear, that sounds challenging. I hope Anastasia can navigate it." Eleanor sighed deeply. "Lyra, frankly, she can't. And Victor is in over his head. We've been reviewing strategic solutions, and your name keeps coming up, ironically, as someone who understood the complexities. Even Anastasia, in a moment of desperation, mentioned a platform she heard about from an old client, something called Cognisphere. She said it was revolutionary." My smile widened. Anastasia, unwittingly, had led them directly to the lion's den. "Cognisphere is indeed a cutting-edge AI platform," I stated calmly. "It specializes in advanced strategic decision-making and real-time integration for complex systems. Arthur Sterling, my partner, is a genius. I'm merely an advisor." "An advisor?" Eleanor's voice held a hint of suspicion. "Regardless, we desperately need a solution, Lyra. The board is authorizing a significant budget for a pilot program with any firm that can demonstrably turn this around. Would you be willing to facilitate a meeting with this Cognisphere?" "I could arrange that," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "But be warned, Cognisphere is in high demand. Our rates are premium and our terms are specific. We don't take on just any client." "We're beyond haggling over terms, Lyra," Eleanor insisted. Just get us that meeting, soon. I agreed, suppressing a triumphant laugh as I hung up. The trap was set. They were coming to me, begging for the very solution they had dismissed. I immediately contacted Arthur. "Arthur, it's time," I announced, my voice brimming with a quiet intensity. "EtherCorp is on the hook. They're reeling from Anastasia's incompetence, and they're looking for a lifeline. They're coming to us." Arthur let out a whoop of delight. "Brilliant! What's the play, Lyra? Hit them hard with our standard package?" "No," I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes. "We're going to create a custom pilot agreement, one that's irresistible on paper, but subtly makes them entirely dependent on our intellectual property and continuous support. And I want a clause, a very specific clause, embedded deep within the technical specifications. Something about utilization of proprietary data models for legacy system integration. It will be innocuous enough for them to overlook, but it will be our ultimate leverage." "A Trojan horse, Lyra?" Arthur chuckled. "Precisely," I confirmed. "They think they're buying a solution. What they'll be signing is a new lease on life, entirely on our terms. They dismissed the architect, now they'll rent the entire blueprint. And when they realize it, it will be too late." The stage was being meticulously prepared for the final act. EtherCorp, in its desperate need for salvation, was about to walk directly into the web I had meticulously woven, unaware that the spider was one of their own, discarded. The meeting was set for a crisp Tuesday morning in a rented conference suite, strategically chosen to be neutral territory, far from EtherCorp's imposing towers. I arrived an hour early, meticulously reviewing the pilot agreement with Arthur Sterling. Every clause, every technical specification had been crafted with surgical precision. It was designed to look like a standard, mutually beneficial partnership, but in reality, it was a financial and intellectual Trojan horse. "Are you sure about this specific clause, Lyra?" Arthur pointed to a seemingly innocuous line deep within the technical appendix, buried amidst specifications for data architecture. It read, "Client agrees to grant Cognisphere full, unencumbered access and the right to utilize all existing proprietary internal data models and legacy system integrations for the sole purpose of optimal system performance and continuous algorithmic refinement, with said refined models becoming the exclusive intellectual property of Cognisphere." I smiled. "That's the linchpin, Arthur. It sounds like standard data sharing for AI optimization, something any company desperate for a fix would agree to. But the key is legacy system integrations. I know for a fact Anastasia, in her attempts to innovate, has been clumsily attempting to integrate my old foundational data models from EtherCorp's archive into her failing projects. She hasn't created anything new, she's just butchering my past work. This clause will legally transfer ownership of that refined, integrated work, my work, to Cognisphere." Arthur let out a low whistle. Diabolical. So, when they realize what they've done, they'll essentially be paying us to own their core operational blueprints, which they couldn't even manage properly. "Precisely," I confirmed. "And it also means if they ever try to cut ties, they'll be left with nothing but broken systems and a legal nightmare, because all their find solutions would belong to us. They'll be trapped." Just as we finished our final review, the EtherCorp delegation arrived. Victor Thorne led the charge, his usual imperious facade looking a little strained around the edges. Beside him was Eleanor Vance, her expression grim, and, to my distinct amusement, Anastasia Rain herself, trying to project an air of competence she clearly didn't possess. A junior board member, Mr. Harrison, a cautious, data-driven man whom I respected, completed their contingent. I chose to remain in the background initially, letting Arthur take the lead for Cognisphere. He was a brilliant orator when it came to technology, eloquently detailing Cognisphere's unparalleled capabilities its proven track record with Omni Logistics, whose name made Victor wince, and its revolutionary approach to urban integration. Our platform can analyze trillions of data points per second, Arthur declared, gesturing towards a holographic display of complex data flows. It's not just about identifying problems, it's about predicting them before they occur and prescribing optimal solutions in real time. For EtherCorp's current challenges with the urban ecosystem integration, we propose a 6-month pilot focusing on the critical infrastructure in Sector Gamma. Victor Thorne, surprisingly subdued, interjected. The cost, Mr. Sterling? And the timeline for tangible results? Arthur smiled, then delivered the figures we'd meticulously calculated. A pilot fee of $2.5 million for the first 3 months, with a projected $7 million for the full 6-month period, and a guaranteed 25% improvement in system efficiency within 90 days. These numbers were aggressive, but backed by Cognisphere's performance. The EtherCorp team exchanged nervous glances. Anastasia looked utterly lost, occasionally nodding vaguely as if she understood. Mr. Harrison, however, leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the financial projections. And the terms of data access and intellectual property? Mr. Harrison asked, always thorough. Arthur smoothly transitioned to the relevant section of the agreement. As is standard for our advanced AI solutions, we require comprehensive access to all relevant operational and historical data. Our algorithms learn and refine themselves continuously. All improvements and new models derived from this refinement, leveraging your legacy data, become the exclusive intellectual property of Cognisphere. This ensures our models remain cutting edge for all our clients, including yourselves, post-pilot. Victor and Anastasia barely registered the full implication. It sounded like technical jargon, typical of AI service contracts. Eleanor Vance gave it a quick scan, but her primary concern was solving the immediate crisis. They were desperate, and desperation blinded them. Mr. Harrison, however, paused. His gaze lingered on the exact clause I had highlighted to Arthur. He frowned slightly, then looked up, his eyes sweeping the room, before briefly meeting mine in the periphery. I offered him a calm, almost imperceptible nod. He seemed to hesitate for a moment longer, a flicker of doubt in his expression. But then the combined pressure from Victor and Eleanor to just get this fixed seemed to outweigh his caution. Looks standard enough for a cutting-edge solution, Victor declared, pushing the document across the table. Eleanor, Harrison, any last questions? Eleanor shook her head. Mr. Harrison, after a final, lingering look at the clause and then at me, reluctantly nodded. Excellent, Victor said, grabbing a pen. Then I believe we have a deal. The agreement was signed. EtherCorp had officially and unwittingly handed over the keys to their strategic future and their past to Cognisphere, and to me. The ink was barely dry on the Cognisphere agreement, yet the shift within EtherCorp was immediate and palpable. Our 6-month pilot program, focusing initially on the ailing Sector Gamma infrastructure, began with a swiftness and precision that starkly contrasted with EtherCorp's usual bureaucratic sluggishness. From my vantage point, now operating almost entirely remotely, I directed Arthur and our team, ensuring every move was calculated. We deployed Cognisphere's advanced analytics, and within mere 2 weeks, our system had not only identified the critical flaws leading to the projected energy losses, but had also provided optimized solutions that promised a 28% increase in efficiency, surpassing the promised 25%. The initial reports from the ground were glowing. Engineers and city officials who had been tearing their hair out over Anastasia's failed solutions were singing Cognisphere's praises. This, of course, put an even harsher spotlight on Anastasia. She tried to take credit, awkwardly presenting Cognisphere's early successes as proof of my strategic foresight in bringing them in. But the technical teams, the ones who truly understood the depth of the problems and the elegance of our solutions, weren't fooled. Their whispered concerns soon reached the ears of middle management, then the board. I watched it unfold, a silent observer in the digital ether. My old colleagues, those who had seen my detailed, methodical work for 2 decades, began making subtle comparisons. Lyra would have caught this. Lyra knew this system inside and out. The sentiment grew, a quiet wave of disillusionment with Anastasia, and by extension, Victor Thorne's judgment. Then came the incident that truly began to unravel everything. About a month into the pilot, Cognisphere detected a critical vulnerability in the city's old data security protocols, which Anastasia had negligently overlooked, deeming it legacy, low-priority architecture. Our system flagged it as a potential access point for a major cyber attack, capable of paralyzing Neo Viridian's entire transit system for 3 days and costing the city an estimated $50 million in damages. The warning was immediate, clear, and accompanied by our proposed fix. I forwarded the alert directly to Eleanor Vance and Mr. Harrison, bypassing the usual chain of command, attaching irrefutable data logs from Cognisphere. I subtly noted that this vulnerability had been identified months ago in my preliminary assessments for the Urban Ecosystem Integration Project, and highlighted in a report that Anastasia had apparently dismissed. The reaction was explosive. An emergency board meeting was called. I heard through my network a few loyal souls still inside EtherCorp who subtly fed me information that Victor Thorne was in a frenzy. He tried to downplay the severity, tried to blame unforeseen legacy system issues, but the cold, hard data from Cognisphere, coupled with my old, unheeded report, made his excuses fall flat. During the heated discussion, a junior board member, a fresh but sharp mind named Ms. Chen, reportedly asked a pointed question. Mr. Thorne, given the critical nature of these oversights and Ms. Rain's repeated failures to grasp core operational details, it begs the question of her true qualifications for this role. What exactly was the basis for her appointment? The room went silent, and then someone, perhaps unintentionally, let slip a fatal piece of information. Not a direct accusation, but a hushed, almost accidental comment about Anastasia often being seen leaving Victor Thorne's private penthouse apartment late at night, or their frequent working dinners that stretched well past midnight, not in executive dining rooms, but in discreet, high-end restaurants known for their privacy. It was just a murmur, a detail shared perhaps in exasperation, but it landed with the force of a bomb. The implications hung in the air. Anastasia Rain wasn't just incompetent. She was a nepotistic appointment, given a critical role because she was Victor Thorne's secret lover. The board members, especially those with significant investments at stake, looked at Victor with a new kind of scrutiny. His face reportedly turned ashen. Anastasia, present at the meeting via video conference, suddenly looked terrified, her practiced composure crumbling. For Lyra, it was a moment of profound, quiet vindication. The truth, meticulously hidden, was now bubbling to the surface, not through my direct accusation, but through their own failings and the inevitable consequences of their hubris. The professional critique had evolved into a personal scandal. Victor Thorne's carefully constructed facade was cracking, revealing the corruption beneath. And I, the discarded veteran, watched from the shadows, ready to guide the next phase of their downfall. The fallout from the emergency board meeting was swift and brutal. The whispers about Anastasia Rain and Victor Thorne's secret affair quickly morphed into undeniable facts, fueled by the mounting evidence of Anastasia's catastrophic failures and Victor's increasingly frantic attempts to shield her. Eleanor Vance and Mr. Harrison, both seasoned professionals with significant influence, spearheaded the movement to hold Victor accountable. Their patience, already thin from EtherCorp's plummeting stock and the looming lawsuits, had finally snapped. I received a discreet call from Eleanor a few days later. Her voice, usually composed, was tight with a barely suppressed fury. "Lyra, you were right. About everything. That smart grid optimization error that Anastasia signed off on, it caused a power surge in a critical data center for 2 hours last night. Not a blackout, thankfully, but it wiped out millions of records for a major financial client. We're looking at damages in the hundreds of millions, possibly more." My heart, though hardened, felt a pang of grim satisfaction. "I'm sorry to hear that, Eleanor," I replied, my tone carefully neutral. "Such oversights are incredibly costly." "Costly is an understatement," she retorted. "And the board knows why. We've compiled enough evidence. Victor's judgment has been severely compromised by his personal entanglements. It's a blatant misuse of power and a dereliction of fiduciary duty. He tried to hide it, but the trail is undeniable. The firm's reputation is in tatters." "So, what's the plan?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. "An ultimatum," Eleanor stated, her voice hardening. "Victor has 3 days to step down, or we initiate formal proceedings for gross misconduct and a forced removal. The board is united on this, even those who were previously loyal. They've seen enough." "And Anastasia?" "She's being removed immediately from all projects and will be quietly dismissed." A small, genuine smile finally touched my lips. Justice. Not sweet, not vengeful, but quiet and precise. This was the inevitable conclusion of their arrogance. Meanwhile, Cognisphere's success continued its meteoric rise. Our solution had stabilized the urban ecosystem integration project in Sector Gamma, not just fixing the immediate issues, but improving overall system efficiency by nearly 30% within 6 weeks. This was a full 5% beyond our guaranteed rate, a testament to Arthur's brilliance and my underlying strategic vision. We were now negotiating new contracts worth a combined $50 million with other major cities, all eager to avoid EtherCorp's catastrophic missteps. Arthur was ecstatic. "Lyra, we're being hailed as saviors. Our market cap just hit $1.8 billion. The offers are pouring in. What's next?" "Patience, Arthur," I said, a glint in my eye. "The real game is about to begin. EtherCorp is in disarray. Their top leadership is crumbling. They are vulnerable, and they are now entirely dependent on us to clean up the mess they created. Remember that clause in the agreement? The one about refined models becoming the exclusive intellectual property of Cognisphere?" "Of course," he replied, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "The Trojan horse." "It's time to activate it," I confirmed. "Once Victor is out, EtherCorp will be scrambling for stability. They'll need a new CEO, a new direction. And they'll need us more than ever. But now, all the intellectual capital that saved them, the very core of what could make them valuable again, belongs to us. They've essentially paid us millions to re-engineer their own failing systems and then sign over the ownership of those very solutions." The strategic landscape had completely shifted. EtherCorp, the behemoth that had once dismissed me, was now a wounded giant, tethered to my creation. Victor Thorne's blind ambition and illicit affair had not only cost him his position, but had unknowingly paved the way for my quiet, strategic takeover. The stage was set for the final confrontation, a moment not of revenge, but of the ultimate reclamation of power and recognition. The fallout from the emergency board meeting was swift and brutal. The whispers about Anastasia Rain and Victor Thorne's secret affair quickly morphed into undeniable facts, fueled by the mounting evidence of Anastasia's catastrophic failures and Victor's increasingly frantic attempts to shield her. Eleanor Vance and Mr. Harrison, Both seasoned professionals with significant influence spearheaded the movement to hold Victor accountable. Their patience, already thin from EtherCorp's plummeting stock and the looming lawsuits, had finally snapped. I received a discreet call from Eleanor a few days later. Her voice, usually composed, was tight with a barely suppressed fury. "Lyra, you were right. About everything. That smart grid optimization error that Anastasia signed off on, it caused a power surge in a critical data center for 2 hours last night. Not a blackout, thankfully, but it wiped out millions of records for a major financial client. We're looking at damages in the hundreds of millions, possibly more." My heart, though hardened, felt a pang of grim satisfaction. "I'm sorry to hear that, Eleanor," I replied, my tone carefully neutral. "Such oversights are incredibly costly." "Costly is an understatement," she retorted. "And the board knows why. We've compiled enough evidence. Victor's judgment has been severely compromised by his personal entanglements. It's a blatant misuse of power and a dereliction of fiduciary duty. He tried to hide it, but the trail is undeniable. The firm's reputation is in tatters." "So, what's the plan?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. "An ultimatum," Eleanor stated, her voice hardening. "Victor has 3 days to step down, or we initiate formal proceedings for gross misconduct and a forced removal. The board is united on this, even those who were previously loyal. They've seen enough." "And Anastasia?" "She's being removed immediately from all projects and will be quietly dismissed." A small, genuine smile finally touched my lips. Justice. Not sweet, not vengeful, but quiet and precise. This was the inevitable conclusion of their arrogance. Meanwhile, Cognisphere's success continued its meteoric rise. Our solution had stabilized the urban ecosystem integration project in Sector Gamma, not just fixing the immediate issues, but improving overall system efficiency by nearly 30% within 6 weeks. This was a full 5% beyond our guaranteed rate, a testament to Arthur's brilliance and my underlying strategic vision. We were now negotiating new contracts worth a combined $50 million with other major cities, all eager to avoid EtherCorp's catastrophic missteps. Arthur was ecstatic. "Lyra, we're being hailed as saviors. Our market cap just hit $1.8 billion. The offers are pouring in. What's next?" "Patience, Arthur," I said, a glint in my eye. "The real game is about to begin. EtherCorp is in disarray. Their top leadership is crumbling. They are vulnerable, and they are now entirely dependent on us to clean up the mess they created. Remember that clause in the agreement? The one about refined models becoming the exclusive intellectual property of Cognisphere?" "Of course," he replied, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "The Trojan horse." "It's time to activate it," I confirmed. "Once Victor is out, EtherCorp will be scrambling for stability. They'll need a new CEO, a new direction. And they'll need us more than ever. But now, all the intellectual capital that saved them, the very core of what could make them valuable again, belongs to us. They've essentially paid us millions to re-engineer their own failing systems and then sign over the ownership of those very solutions." The strategic landscape had completely shifted. EtherCorp, the behemoth that had once dismissed me, was now a wounded giant, tethered to my creation. Victor Thorne's blind ambition and illicit affair had not only cost him his position, but had unknowingly paved the way for my quiet, strategic takeover. The stage was set for the final confrontation, a moment not of revenge, but of the ultimate reclamation of power and recognition. The air in the EtherCorp boardroom was thick with tension, heavier than any I'd ever experienced in my 2 decades there. This wasn't the usual grand ceremony for a new CEO. It was a terse, almost somber affair. Victor Thorne was gone, forced into a humiliating resignation, a few days prior. Anastasia Rain had vanished from the corporate landscape entirely. Her brief, disastrous tenure ending in disgrace. The firm was bleeding talent, losing clients, and teetering on the edge of a financial precipice. I walked in precisely 5 minutes late, a subtle power play that went unnoticed by most, but not by Eleanor Vance or Mr. Harrison. They looked up, relief flickering across their weary faces. The room was packed with board members, investors, and a handful of senior executives who had managed to weather the storm. My presence, as the lead consultant for Cognisphere, the company now single-handedly propping up EtherCorp's failing infrastructure, was expected. What they didn't expect, however, was the true extent of my influence. Arthur Sterling, my brilliant partner, was already there, patiently answering questions about Cognisphere's miraculous turnaround of the Urban Ecosystem Integration Project. He handed me the remote for the holographic display as I took my place at the head of the table, the very seat Victor Thorne had so imperiously occupied. A subtle shiver ran down my spine, not of triumph, but of profound satisfaction. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice clear and resonant, filling the tense silence. "As you know, Cognisphere has successfully stabilized EtherCorp's critical systems, exceeding the efficiency guarantees outlined in our pilot agreement by a full 6%. I activated the display, showing crisp, undeniable data visualizations. The red lines of decline were flattening, then slowly turning green, thanks entirely to Cognisphere's intervention. The board members, previously skeptical and agitated, nodded in grudging approval. However, I continued, my gaze sweeping across the room, settling for a moment on Eleanor and Mr. Harrison, then on the faces of the remaining loyal executives. It's not enough to simply stabilize. EtherCorp requires fundamental restructuring, not just technical fixes. Your strategic framework is obsolete. Your leadership, under previous guidance, made critical errors that cost the company hundreds of millions in potential revenue and damaged your market standing irrevocably. Lyra's story powerfully illustrates that true competence and dedicated contribution hold lasting value far beyond any personal connections or favoritism. When underestimated and cast aside, Lyra didn't seek blind revenge. Instead, she chose to build a superior solution, leveraging her intellect and strategic thinking to prove her worth. Ultimately, the lack of transparency and poor decisions driven by self-interest cost Victor Thorne dearly, while Lyra, through her resilience and adaptability, returned to reclaim power, not as an employee, but as the architect of the very company that once discarded her. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider checking out my next video. I appreciate your support.